All right, welcome back. We talked about New Year's resolutions kind of to open the show and whether we were resolutions guys, but we're going to talk about what each team needs to do going into the new year, what their New Year's resolution should be, and we're going to start with the Grizzlies, and I'll actually start. What I want to see from the Grizzlies is you got to find your trade piece because we think the Grizzlies are going to be one of the best teams here in the Western Conference. Think they can make a deep playoff run, and so you got to go find that guy that I think can really put you over the top. And you're going to have to use some of these guys that you are seeing here in the VO here. Jake LaRavia, Luke Kennard. I say Marcus Smart as well can be a potential trade piece even though he's hurt. And it kind of sucks for them that he, in the second year in a row, that Marcus Smart is kind of dealing with a finger injury. Because people need some tape on him, you know what I'm saying?
Some finger tape.
Some finger tape, for sure. If you're the Grizzlies, I think you really got to find that piece out there in the trade market because I think they're in a situation where they should be top five-ish team in the West as far as, at least from what we've seen so far. You're going to need some guys who are battle-tested in the playoffs. I think what you have right now is that Jake LaRavia can be a really sell-high piece. I think Luke Kennard, with his 44% three-point shooting, is something that a lot of teams are going to be interested in because every team needs a shooter. And quite honestly, on the Jake LaRavia tip as well, also somebody who's shooting 44% from three. And then John Conchar is one of those energy guys that I think his salary that he's making right now is going to be something that a lot of teams are going to be interested in. So if you are the Grizzlies, you're serious about trying to make that real playoff push, a conference finals, potentially an NBA finals, you got to find that one guy who can you can offload some salary with and bring in that's going to bring in some talent that I think can put you over the edge.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, Avery. It'll be interesting to see who they bring in. Selling high on Jake LaRavia is something I think that they need to do. Jake LaRavia is great. He is, in a way, a glue guy for them as well. He's a high-energy guy. But right now, they have the guy. They've got Ja Morant, and my New Year's resolution for the Grizzlies is Ja Morant needs to play at an all-star level. And when he comes back from his injury, I want him to play somewhere around 27 points, 27 to 30 points per game. You got SGA out here looking like he could win the MVP. He's averaging 30 points per game. Ja Morant could go out there and 100% average around that same number. And if he does, the Grizzlies are at their best. When Ja's putting up around that tick, and then you add in Jaren Jackson Jr. around 23 points per game, why not? Can we bring up some of those Ja highlights? I would love to see some of those great some of those great Ja Morant highlights.
There we go.
Ja definitely has the potential. He just doesn't play enough, Avery. I mean, we're going on 2 years where he hasn't played 5 games in a row in 2 years. If Ja can play consistently and stay healthy in the playoffs, I could easily see this Memphis Grizzlies team going on a run. Why not? But he needs to stay healthy. I think he can average 27 points per game. We just haven't seen it yet this season, and it's the way that he plays. He's such an explosive player that the way he plays, he injures himself. He hurts himself by the way he plays, but he'll never turn that down. And that's just what the Grizzlies have to live with.
It's been really interesting because he said so much like he's not going to do as much of the high flying as we've seen. He's not trying to dunk as much this year. And I think what's kind of been difficult for the Grizzlies is, to your point, he really hasn't had to play at the 27 to 30 point range. I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr. has been playing out of his mind. He's the leading scorer right now, also doing it really well on the defensive end as well. So Ja really hasn't had to be a 27, 28, 29, 30 point kind of night every single night. But what he does do is control the offense. He controls the pace. He's been playing so much better defensively this year. So to your point, he is going to have to take his game up just another level. This kind of sucks in terms of actual all-star voting that he's going to be, it looks like, on the bench just for at least a little bit. His arm was in the sling last night, so we don't know how long he will or will not be on the floor. But I think he's already an all-star level player. We know what he's capable of bringing to the floor, but he's definitely got to up it if the Grizzlies are going to make the kind of run that they want to make here going into the playoffs. Let's talk about those Memphis Tigers. I think my New Year's resolution for the Memphis Tigers, I want you to leave no doubt in conference play. What we saw, I hate to bring up last year, but we saw what happened last year. They had that stretch of 4 games where they lost 4 games in a row in conference play after having a phenomenal non-conference run. They went 10-3 in the non-conference this year. When we talked to Penny Hardaway after the Ole Miss win, he said this stretch of non-conference play that the Tigers had this year was the most satisfying non-conference run they've had since he's been the head coach, because they've had to do it against some really, really good teams. Obviously, they talk about the Maui Invitational, where you go, you beat a UConn, you go to meet a Michigan State. Penny called it the best Maui Invitational group that the tournament has had. Then you come back, you win 2 on the road at Clemson, you win at Virginia, 2 hard, really tough places to play on the East Coast, and then you come back, you drop 1 against Mississippi State, but you get a really big win against Ole Miss. You kind of redeem yourselves from the loss that you had the previous year. Now that you go into conference play, you have to leave no doubt. You can't leave any room for the voters for the NCAA tournament to say, this team is not nearly as good as we thought they were. They're losing to teams like a North Texas, who is the next closest to them in terms of quad 1 and quad 2 play. Memphis 40th in the net right now, 8-2 in quad 1 and 2 games. I don't think anybody else has as many quad 1 and 2 wins in the entire country. I think Auburn's next. You got North Texas, who is 73rd in the net. They're the next closest to you. They're 2-2 in quad 1 and 2 games. And then you got Florida Atlantic is 3rd. They're 90th in the net with, let me look at it, 1-4 in quad 1 and 2 games. You have to be able to beat these teams, and I'll say it, you got to beat them convincingly. Because what we talk about every single year is that you don't want to be on that 8-9 line, right, when it comes to the NCAA tournament. The way they've set themselves up with a non-conference play, they can be a top 5-ish seed going into the NCAA tournament. And really, they need to win the AAC tournament and not even make it a question. Yeah,
the only way they make top 5 is if they pretty much run the slate the rest of the season. You can run the slate and then still not win the AAC and probably make 5 or 6. But yeah, I think that they need to be more consistent overall, and we are leaving non-conference with a good taste, and Tigers fans, good taste in their mouth, and there's no reason why this confidence booster can't carry into this coming up conference play. FAU's a really good start. FAU's they're not the FAU team that was last year, just so everyone knows. If you haven't been keeping track of FAU, North Texas as well, very different looking team. The next team behind North Texas, sitting there at 107 in the net, Wichita State, very different team as well. Somebody who can really help with their consistency is Colby Rogers. And that is my resolution, Avery.
I like it.
Colby
Rogers.
You
want masked Colby Rogers.
I want masked Colby Rogers right here. Right here. We need the mask to come out more. Is this good, Colby? Am I doing it right? We need the masked Colby Rogers to come out more. Just like we saw headband Musa Cisse, we need more of masked Colby Rogers, because his confidence was at an all-time high. We saw it as Colby Rogers with Wichita State knocked out Memphis last year, and that was one of the most confident guys that I saw play basketball all year in college basketball last year, live at least. Colby needs to be around 15 a game, in my opinion. 15's a little bit high. If it was 12 or 13, if he could sustain that, I think that that's all right as well. Tyrese Hunter and PJ Haggerty, we've seen their potential. Those are the 2 best guys on the team. Colby is a close third, very close third. Can PJ sustain his numbers throughout the season? We asked that same question about David Jones last year, and David Jones did it in his sleep. I think PJ Haggerty can also do it. I think Tyrese Hunter can be that guy where he says, Coach, what do you need from me tonight? And he's going to go out. He's going to either lead the team in assist or he's going to lead the team in 3-pointers. I think he has that ability. Colby Rogers, we have not seen it yet. Heading into this game, in the last 2 games, he had hit 1 shot. And he was in double-digit missed shots. I think he was like 1 of 13, something like that. It was 1 or 2 of 13. Abysmal from somebody like Colby Rogers. To be able to have the confidence to score single digits in the last 2 games, score 0 points in one of them, to come in and put up a career-high 28 points. I know it's at home, but against a very good defensive Ole Miss team. Yeah, it's a good team. Ole Miss was throwing everything that they had at him, and he couldn't do anything. And you and I were talking, the release looked smoother. Colby Rogers has a very high release, and when you get that going, it's very hard to defend, something that you pointed out earlier when we were working on the show. I think that Colby Rogers, at his best, is one of the better guards in the country, and when you combine that with Tyrese Hunter and PJ Haggerty, that's a 5th seed right there.
Yeah, there you go. To your point, Colby is easily the best 3-point shooter on the team. I think PJ is going to we're expecting PJ to be kind of in that David Jones conversation where he was an All-American kind of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that for the Tigers right now, they have a 1A and 1B in terms of PJ Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter. And there's an argument for there to be a 1C. And I think Colby can be that 1C option. We've talked about earlier in this year where Penny Hardaway called them the best backcourt trio in the entire country. And I think that holds true because when you can get a game against a top 25 and really a top 16 team in what Ole Miss was, and you get a guy like that who is obviously on the scouting report for being a three-point shooter, but comes in and puts up 28 points. PJ again gave you 17 and 6 assists. Tyrese really didn't score that well, so you needed somebody who was going to be the obvious point man and a high leader in that game, and that's where Colby was. And I think he's going to be that in a lot of games this season because there are going to be nights where Tyrese doesn't shoot well. There are going to be nights where PJ doesn't shoot well. There are going to be nights where, maybe you're getting beat on the boards in the front court, and you're going to need that guy who can really kind of be the spark plug or the X factor in pretty much every game. And I think Colby is going to be that one. If he's hitting 2 to 3 threes a game every game, I think the Tigers are going to be just fine. It was interesting to your point about the slump that he was in. He said, even Steph Curry went into a shooting slump, right? That. He said, if Steph Curry can go into a shooting slump, who am I to be a mortal man and not be able to go through my own shooting slump and come out of it? And he said, as long as he's doing the other things right, you're still playing defense really well, you're still rebounding well, you're moving the ball when it is appropriate. He's still going to be just fine. I think we saw that. We've seen that throughout the year. Even though he hasn't shot the ball well, the defensive metrics have still been really good for him in these last couple of games. So let's talk about our last New Year's resolution for the year. We're going to talk about Ole Miss. For me, Ole Miss, you got to find toughness fast because I think what we saw with the Memphis game is Memphis kind of punked you just a little bit in ways that we really didn't expect Ole Miss to be punked. We talked about predictions before the game on Saturday, and I said I think Ole Miss pulls one out in a close one. And I was very wrong. So you got to find toughness fast. To my big point, you got to find toughness in the front court. I think their total rebound margin for the year, they're 11-2. Total rebound margin for the year, they're -9. Mm-hmm. They're 2-2 in quad one games. They really haven't played a ton of competition. I think when it all kind of measures or evens itself out, they're going to see some of those quad one games maybe end up in the quad two kind of scenario. I really want to see them play better, and you got to play better quickly because you're going into SEC play. And when we talked to Chris Beard about, what is your biggest concern going into your SEC play, and the first thing he says was, we got to figure out the rebounding situation. Mm-hmm. Somebody's got to take it upon themselves in that front court to say, hey, I'm going to dominate on the front court every single night. I'm going to box out harder than anybody else is boxing out because you can't lose the Battle of the Boards and expect to play well in the SEC, especially the SEC this year when it's been an absolute gauntlet.
Well, and they lost Moussa Cisse, who could have been that guy for them this year. And you look at how many offensive rebounds he had against Ole Miss. He had 7 offensive rebounds. You have someone like Malik Dia, who was more of the Jaren Jackson Jr. type
kind of a
build.
finesser.
Yeah, a finesse guy. He can still body someone in the paint. He's got the right moves in the paint. But when it comes to boxing out someone like Dane Danger, Moussa Cisse, and there's a lot of those type of guys in the SEC, they don't really have anyone like that. So I don't really know what they do. You may just have to live with being -9 in the rebounding
yeah. You got to shoot well. You got to shoot well every night.
You're going to have to shoot well because they're not getting offensive boards either, and they're struggling with offensive boards against. But they need a dog. I agree. You're talking about toughness, and someone that can be that dog for them is Whitehaven's own, South Memphis' own, Matthew Morrell.
Shout out Matt Morrell.
Shout out Matt Morrell. I'm sure that this weekend, coming back to his hometown, not putting up that many numbers.
Oh, he always wants to show out against Memphis.
He always wants to show out, and he was certainly shooting the rock.
Words are hard.
Matt Morrell has not been the guy that he was last year. A lot of us thought that he was going to go into the NBA draft, decided to come back, take one last ride with Chris Beard and these boys, and it hasn't worked out for him so far. I know he's been fighting off injuries throughout the season. He should be back now around, I think he played close to 28 minutes against Memphis. He should be back up where they want him to be, around 32 minutes a game, which is what he was doing last year. He's not shooting that badly at all, 43%, but he's taking less field goals a game. And he's getting back to putting up 11 or 12, which is the same numbers that he had last year. But last year, you look at, he's teasing 20 points per game. This year it's 11 points per game. They need that from him. Sean Padula is great, and Sean Padula's come in and over a 3-game stretch heading into Memphis, he was averaging around 22 points per game.
Yeah.
And if you look at everything else that goes along with Sean Padula's game, his passing, his defense, he's looking like the best player on this Rebels team, but he's not. Matt Morrell is the best player on this Ole Miss team. They have 14 quad 1 games coming up in the SEC. If Matt Morrell is not averaging around 21 points per game, it's a lost season for Ole Miss, in my opinion, unless you think Juju Murray's going to come up for him, who's a great guard, great guy. Sean Padula and Juju Murray are going to have to average around 22 points per game in order for Ole Miss to be that team in the SEC that Chris Beard believes they can be. Matt Morrell is also the toughness factor too. He looked good defensively against Memphis, but he needs to continue that, and it's all about confidence, I believe. You come back from an injury, you need that confidence back, and it's difficult. Do I believe Matthew Morrell can do it? 100%. I think that he is at the level of someone of a mid-range G League guy right now, which is where I think he would be if he went to the draft.
I think you want him in that he's got to be an all SEC first team, all SEC second team kind of guy for Ole Miss to have the kind of season that I think they want. I think his defense does fuel some of his offense. I mean, we know Matt to be the premier three-point shooter, but I think as long as he can still allow his defense to be an impact on every single game, I think he's going to be fine because he's the kind of offensive player that, to the point we were making about Colby Rogers, you know, he may go through dry spells, but he's such a great shooter that it's going to come back eventually at some point. And so I think we'll see that here pretty soon. I think when the competition ratchets up, Matt tends to meet the moment. Maybe not necessarily on Saturday, but everybody has bad games. I think if he gets into a scenario where he is, I wouldn't say 21. I think 21 is that's kind of an All-American level. I think if he can get in somewhere into that 16 to 18 point range, kind of match what he was doing last year, I think they're going to have the kind of season that they want, especially because Sean Padula is playing so well. I think him and Juju Murray are still kind of figuring out what that 1-2 scenario looks like, in that backcourt. But I think Matthew Morrell is a really, really good player. And Ole Miss, when they entered the year, we talked about how all that senior leadership that they had this season, and the first person we talked about was having Matthew Morrell back and how big of an impact that was going to be. So got to see what they do. They play Georgia first to start their SEC play. That is next Saturday, and they get them at home. So an excellent opportunity to start on the right track.